The story begins with a woman who suddenly notices her neighbors frantically packing up and moving. She and her husband try to help, but the moment the neighbors see them, they react with sheer panic, as if they'd seen monsters. Confused, the couple walks out onto the street, only to discover that everyone in the neighborhood is fleeing in terror. Something horrifying seems to be happening. Nick has no idea what's going on, but to be safe, he decides to get his family out of there. As they drive away, they suddenly see the same neighbors who just fled, now racing back toward town at top speed. Things are getting stranger by the second, and Nick's family grows more anxious. Eventually, traffic forces them to stop. That's when they realize the only exit out of town has been blocked by the military. Helicopters are flying overhead, urging civilians to return home. On the news, there's a constant warning: go back inside immediately. Some residents begin turning their cars around. Nick and his family start to panic. Is this another virus outbreak? A total lockdown? Just then, a rock falls and bursts their tire. Looking up, they see dust clouds rising from the cliffs above. Moments later, 2 fighter jets roar past them and head straight for their town. No one knows what's going on until the jets suddenly drop bombs, launching a full-scale carpet bombing across the area they just left. Everyone is frozen in shock. If Nick's family had listened and gone back home, they'd be dead. The town is now covered in smoke and flames. No one could have survived that. But then it gets worse. The fighter jets finish their run, then turn around, heading directly toward them. That's when the horrifying truth hits them. The military isn't just attacking the town, they're targeting everyone. There's no time to think. The crowd scatters in all directions. Nick's wife, Anna, looks up and spots a water tower on the mountain. She grabs her family and makes a run for it. But the second wave of bombing begins. Explosions tear through the road they were just standing on. Their daughter is thrown off her feet by the shockwave. The military clearly isn't holding back. They keep running until they reach a school at the top of the hill. There, they find an old underground bunker. It's not clear whether it can withstand the blast, but it's their only hope. As the jets close in, Nick smashes the chains off the door and leads his family inside. Just as he slams it shut, a massive explosion shakes the ground above them. What on earth is happening outside? Why would the government go this far? They have no answers, only fear. For now, they can only wait. Luckily, the basement is full of expired canned food. It's not ideal, but it's enough to survive for a while. They lock the bunker tight and prepare to stay underground, but life in isolation is miserable. Every day, they eat the same disgusting rainbow-colored canned meals and drink murky water from an underground well. To pass the time, they play cards and hide and seek. Days blend together, and the world outside begins to feel like a lost cause. Over time, their daughter is the first to break. She asks her dad how long they'll have to stay there. Nick doesn't know. He just tells her that once the virus is gone and nature comes back, they'll see the sun again. But that day never comes. Weeks turn into months. Over 300 days pass. The daughter often uses a gadget Anna built to peek through the air vent, but every time, all she sees is destruction, burned houses, charred trees, and nothing alive in sight. Even after all this time, their daughter still hadn't given up. One night, while her parents were asleep, she quietly climbed the ladder and yanked at the chains, trying to open the bunker and sneak out. But what no one expected was that the noise she accidentally made would bring them serious trouble. By now, the family had been living underground for 301 days, surviving only on canned food. But now, only 13 cans were left. Anna asked what flavor the daughter wanted, but she looked defeated. After eating nothing but canned meals every day, even with different flavors, they were all made from the same disgusting fermented bean base. What she didn't know was that this would be her last one. When she opened the can, she was shocked to find it completely empty. Anna checked the rest, and to her horror, every can was the same. All of them had been eaten through. Judging by the small holes in the lids, rats had gotten in and eaten their last remaining food. The door may have been sealed tight to keep the monsters out, but the open air vent gave the rats a way in and out. Anna tried to comfort her, saying that tomorrow, her dad would go up to the surface to find more food. But just then, a noise behind them made the girl jump. A rat had returned, trying to steal more. Nick immediately grabbed a knife, ready to kill it. He crouched down and crept forward slowly. The tension in the air was thick. Anna and her daughter held their breath. Nick lunged, but missed. The rat darted onto the table and tried to escape. Nick spun around and stabbed again. Still missed. The rat slipped between Anna and her daughter and raced toward the vent. Then suddenly, Anna struck fast. Her brutal precision shocked even Nick. It was clear this harsh environment was beginning to change them, but there was no time to celebrate. A strong, burning smell filled the room. They turned around and saw the oil lamp had tipped over and caught fire. Nick tried to grab it, but the bottle was too hot. As the pressure inside the lamp built up, it suddenly exploded. Flaming oil sprayed across the table. Anna tore down the curtains to smother the flames. Nick rushed to the water well and pumped out half a bucket to douse the fire. Together, they managed to put it out, but thick black smoke had already escaped through the vent. That could expose their location. All they could do now was pray that the monsters outside wouldn't notice them in the dark. They made it through the terrifying night, but in the morning, Nick discovered something worse. The mirror was now coated in a thick layer of soot. That meant the smoke had not only escaped, but left black residue around the vent as well. To avoid being discovered, Nick and Anna decided to take the risk and go outside to clean it up. After unlocking the chains, they paused to listen. No sound. It seemed safe. Carefully, they opened the hatch and climbed out, leaving their daughter alone in the bunker. She waited a long time, but they didn't return. Worried, she climbed on a stool and used her makeshift periscope to check the outside. She saw her parents disguising the vent entrance, but just as she turned the lens, a dark shadow flashed through the forest. She panicked and shouted to warn her dad, but the distance was too far. They couldn't hear her. Terrified, she ignored her fear, climbed the ladder, and opened the hatch. She crawled out, only to realize the area was completely empty. Her parents were gone, but before she could panic, they reappeared, safe and sound. Relieved, the girl rambled in panic, trying to explain. Then suddenly, she pointed behind them, but it turned out to be a false alarm. Nick finally breathed a sigh of relief. Nick gently stroked his daughter's head, trying to calm her down, but Anna was still confused. Why were those people running? What were they running from? Realizing something dangerous was nearby, the family rushed back to the bunker. Nick sealed the entrance with wooden boards, then locked the hatch with chains. Only after adding multiple layers of security did he finally stop and listen. He held his breath, and sure enough, footsteps echoed from outside. They grew louder, until they were directly overhead. A monster was out there, pacing back and forth above them, as if it sensed something unusual below. The family froze, matching their movements to the sound of the footsteps. Then the steps stopped, right above the bunker door. A terrible feeling crept over them. All they could do was pray they wouldn't be discovered. Suddenly, the monster began yanking at the chains, violently trying to break in. Even with the chains reinforced, the monster wasn't giving up. It was sure someone was down there. One by one, the chains started snapping. The door couldn't hold much longer. In a desperate move, Anna climbed the ladder and held the chain with her bare hands, using her own strength to keep the creature out. Nick ran to wedge cement blocks under the door, but by the time he reached the top, it was too late. The iron door burst open, and two glowing green eyes stared straight at them. Nick reacted instantly, stabbing the creature in the face with a metal pipe. Caught off guard, the monster reeled back in pain. Nick slammed the door shut and jammed the pipe across it. The footsteps faded. The family finally exhaled, but they knew it was only a matter of time before more would come. They sat by the stairs, hopeless. Maybe, just maybe, the monster would give up, but reality hit hard. 20 minutes later, the supply room's cabinet began to shake violently. Heavy footsteps echoed overhead. A whole group of monsters had arrived. They gathered at the hatch and launched a full attack. With a loud crash, the iron door finally fell, the dark opening filled with countless glowing eyes. Outnumbered, Nick grabbed his family and ran into the supply room. They lit a curtain on fire to slow the monsters down, then pushed a heavy cabinet in front of the door, but it wouldn't hold for long. They had nowhere else to run. Death seemed inevitable. Nick climbed onto a table and used a stick to poke open a loose wooden plank in the ceiling. Then he lifted Anna up and pushed her through the hole. Luckily, the monsters had all entered through the main hatch, so the surface above was clear. It was their only chance to escape. Nick then pulled his daughter up as well. Now, only he was left in the bunker, with monsters staring at him through the flames. He turned and tried to crawl through the vent too, but quickly realized it was too small. His shoulders were stuck. Even with Anna pulling with all her strength, he couldn't budge. With no other option, Nick made a brutal decision. He forced himself to stay calm. Then, with terrifying resolve, twisted his own arm until it snapped. Anna didn't hesitate. She pulled with everything she had. Even their young daughter jumped in to help. Just as Nick was nearly out, a huge foot stepped through the flames and grabbed his leg. Realizing he wouldn't make it, Nick used his last moment to tell Anna and his daughter to go, and then he was violently pulled back into the bunker. Anna dove toward the vent, but all she could hear was the sound of a fierce struggle and her husband screaming in agony. She knew what had happened. There was no time to mourn. Holding her daughter tightly, she turned and ran. But as they fled, they noticed something strange. The familiar highway had turned into a wasteland, now just a graveyard of wrecked cars stacked in heaps. In the distance, massive walls had been erected, with searchlights scanning the ground like a predator's gaze. There was nowhere left to run. Suddenly, a helicopter spotted Anna and her daughter. A blinding spotlight lit them up. There was no escape. Anna tried to pull her daughter back into the shadows, but before they could move, a giant net swept them off their feet. At the same time, several dark figures with glowing green eyes approached. That's when they finally realized the monsters weren't monsters at all. They were fully armed soldiers, but whatever their reason, These people had no right to treat civilians this way. Anna begged them to spare her daughter, but the soldiers didn't flinch. Instead, they pulled out large instruments and stabbed them both in the neck. Thick black blood was drawn into the devices, confirming that both of them were infected. Without hesitation, the soldiers raised their guns. They were going to execute them on the spot. It turned out that the entire town had already been infected by a virus, invisible, scentless, and airborne. Most people didn't even realize they'd been exposed. To stop the outbreak, the government resorted to the most brutal but effective method: immediate extermination. Nick's family, who had fled underground to survive, were now considered the most dangerous carriers. With no cure in sight, the authorities had decided to kill anyone they found. Just as the trigger was about to be pulled, a spray of blood burst from the commanding officer's neck. Nick had returned from the dead, but now his face was bulging with veins, his eyes blood red. He looked like a monster. He had mutated. His strength and speed were now beyond human. In an instant, he knocked down 2 soldiers. The others opened fire, but Nick didn't even flinch. He kept attacking, taking out several more before they could react. If the rest hadn't fired back in time, he might have taken out the entire squad. But eventually, Nick was overwhelmed and collapsed to the ground. Confirming his death, the soldiers turned back to Anna and her daughter, only to realize that the trap had been destroyed. The commander immediately ordered a manhunt. The 2 infected must not escape. Meanwhile, the daughter had crawled into an abandoned car, hiding low as soldiers approached. Anna, with incredible speed, launched a counterattack. In the blink of an eye, several soldiers were down, but no matter how skilled she was, she couldn't dodge bullets. A shot hit her, and she collapsed onto the hood of a car. Her daughter saw everything from inside. Overwhelmed with pain and rage, she began to mutate. Just as a soldier raised his gun to finish Anna, the girl leapt out, tackled him to the ground, and unleashed a furious barrage of punches. Now mutated, she couldn't control her emotions. She was about to beat the soldier to death when Anna, despite her injury, stepped in to stop her. She didn't want her daughter's hands stained with blood, and she didn't want her to become a killer. With Anna's constant calming words, the girl finally regained control. Slowly, her body returned to normal, but the soldier she attacked wasn't so lucky. With her helmet cracked, she too had been infected. Her fate would be the same as every other resident in the town. Above, the helicopters searching for them were closing in. Anna had no choice but to grab her daughter and keep running. They passed through heaps of wreckage, only to stumble upon a hidden underground tunnel. With no other option, they descended into the darkness. Using a lighter to guide them, they pressed forward. Suddenly, a beam of light hit them, but it wasn't the military. It was Mark, a neighbor's child. He motioned for them to follow. At a bend in the tunnel, he stopped, pulled aside a curtain, and to Anna's surprise, a group of familiar faces appeared. There were other survivors, many, in fact. Forced to live like moles underground, they had created a hidden refuge. Life here was bleak and shadowed, but they had each other, and that was enough to survive. As sunlight peeked through a small crack in the ceiling, Anna looked up with hope. She believed one day humanity would find a way to fight back, and they would rebuild the light.